Welcome back to NatChat, the Natilik podcast. My name is Rob Thorne. This week, we're discussing the evolution of the contact centre. Traditionally, the role of the contact centre worker has been one of the most strongly associated with being tethered to the office. So in a world that's seen the concept of the office as a centre of work change so drastically over the last 12 months, how has the industry adapted to this? I'm joined as always by a collection of industry experts to analyse how we've seen changes to the way in which customers interact with contact centres. This is by far the most conversational show that we've recorded so far, and one that I've very much enjoyed being a part of. It really comes across how passionate the guys were talking about their experiences. We cover a wide range of topics, from the reduction of human touch and an increase in self-service to a more strategic drive towards the cloud in this episode of the Natilik podcast. Alright, it's Thursday 15th of April and we've got another full house of industry experts today to talk contact centre with us. So I'll start by introducing our very special guest first from Cisco, Matthew Drayton. How are you doing, sir?
Hi Rob, yes, I wouldn't necessarily say special guest, but yeah, it's good to be here.
I'll be the judge of that, thank you very much. I like to make a song and dance for all of my listeners. And I'm also delighted to welcome back Natilik's own James Nunn for his second appearance. Hey James.
Thank you for having me. Yep, glad to be here.
Glad to have you aboard. And I've also brought along one of Natilik's contact centre specialists for the first time, Ajmal Mahmood, for his first Natilik podcast appearance. Ajmal, welcome, my friend.
Could be the first of many.
I hope so.
Never know.
I hope so. I very much hope so. But we'll see how well
he'll be the judge of that.
Yeah, we'll see. Yes, James knows.
See how this one goes.
Yeah. I'll let you know. I'll give you a score out of 10 at the end of the podcast. That's how this usually works. So, listener, we continue our discussion on technology and the return to office today, as we continue to progress towards the end of lockdown measures in the UK. Following on from our Wi-Fi show, we're discussing how contact centre has been impacted and what we at Natilik and Cisco are seeing in the market. So let's start off by getting to know our guests a little bit. Matthew, I'm going to come back to you first. Very much enjoying your recent contact centre YouTube series and very excited to have got you on the show before Netflix swoop in and offer you a deal for a series. So for any listeners that don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your history?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rob. The YouTube stuff is going well. Coming into Cisco in January, one of the things that I thought was needed to become a bit more tangible was actually look and feel of the new WebEx contact center interface and getting that out there. So that's been a little project. But yeah, joined the business at the beginning of the year. I'm actually a returning Cisco employee. I came into Cisco a while back through the Tamberg acquisition, which was a lot of fun. Back in those days, I was doing a technical role. But then for the past 7 years or so, I've been doing collaboration and contact center sales with AT&T, which also has been awesome. And then I took a stint with Capgemini last year. But as with the COVID times last year, it was kind of an interesting scenario. I actually joined Capgemini before COVID, but then as that then changed, everything moved online, of course, especially in terms of sales. So my life was on LinkedIn and Sales Navigator, which was a lot of fun, a lot of new connections created, etc., which was really good. Anyway, speaking with Cisco, they convinced me to come on board, especially with obviously the development, I suppose, not just in the market, but in the Cisco technology and where their route is, the IMI acquisition being another example of that. And it's been great to meet yourself and the rest of the Natilik team. It's been great to start engaging with customers. And what they say, it's better busy than bored. And I can tell you now, it's very busy. So thrown in the deep end and loving it so far.
I like it, yeah. Lots going on in the Cisco world of contact center, which we like to see. So we'll touch on that a little bit later. Next, we're glad to have you aboard, Ajmal. I'm going to come to you next. So I've been wanting to get you on for a while now to talk contact center. So introduce yourself to the listeners. Tell us what keeps you busy day to day, because I know you've got a lot of experience in the contact center world.
Yeah, I've been around contact centers for a really long time, and a lot of it is purely around Cisco. So I've seen a big evolution in what Cisco is always a core technology, but I've worked on big contact center deployments. I did the 2011 census Cisco contact center, the HMRC contact center, which was kind of 20,000 agents. Those kind of deployments that I've worked on. At the moment, it's all about AI, it's all about digital, it's all about self-service, it's all about automation. So, reaching out to Google, talking about leveraging AWS cloud native applications, and in the latest versions of Cisco contact center software, you've got all of that built in, where you've got an orchestration layer that allows you to just automatically reach out to all those different cloud services. So lots of exciting stuff happening. And that's the stuff that's keeping the more cutting edge stuff is keeping me busier more recently, whereas 12 months ago and before it was very different.
So the exciting stuff. So nice. I like it. Dropping names left and right, talking about the exciting stuff. This is what we want. This is what we want, the big ticket stuff, Ajmal. So good to have you aboard. Last but definitely not least, James Nunn, second time on the show. Give us a quick intro for anyone that doesn't know about you. And
definitely not making up the numbers here. Yeah, James Nunn, account director at Natilik. I've been here for 6 years. I'm currently very cold because I turned off the heater a bit too early, and then now the sun's gone away and I'm freezing in my cabin.
It's currently snowing in central London,
I'm pretty sure it's snowing here right now as well, because I feel like it's like -1 or something. But contact center, back to the topic. I did no contact center prior to joining Natilik, and then I joined Natilik and realized that it was something that I probably needed to upskill on. And so I sat in a room with Fernando Madeira of Natilik for 3 hours, and he taught me contact center, or at least the fundamentals of it. And it was eye-opening, and it was really interesting. From a sales perspective, it was the first proper time that I've had someone explain to me sort of the how our approach would be fundamentally different to what I'd done before, and really talking operational excellence, user experience, the customer journey or client journey, and just being sort of less and less about the tech. Sorry, Cisco. But it was, it was really interesting. It was a really interesting kind of different type of sale, and then to talk around all the solutions that kind of plug into that and how we make things work for our clients was great. And it's I would say it's definitely a passion of mine. I do quite enjoy talking to clients about contact center, because we get to talk about real things, about how we help our clients, and also being a consumer and having to deal with a contact center every now and then, it's always interesting to bring that perspective to it. So thanks for having me again.
I suppose we're all contact center experts, James, when it comes to being a customer ourselves. We've all had those excellent and not so excellent experiences.
Exactly.
But we're probably the worst customers for contact centers. Well, surely we are. Why can't you see 100%. That data? Why are you connected over there? Why don't you know this about me already? That kind of stuff.
That's a good point.
I know you can do this. I know you can do this.
Yeah. It's dangerous, a little knowledge, isn't it, in these situations? And it's funny you say that, actually, because I changed banks recently, which I know you and all of our listeners are probably dying to hear more about. But it was a very interesting experience as someone that's involved in discussing the mechanics of a contact center on a day-to-day basis. Now, I'm not going to start calling out said banks and throwing shade on the podcast, because I'm better than that. So they will remain unnamed.
Name and shame.
Well, I would say that they are. I've moved from one of the best, so-called best voted companies for or banks for customer service to another one. So there you go. There's a hint. But I think I found it really interesting, just the fact that it really stood out to me how my experience as a customer actually changed very little behind the scenes, which is a good thing, obviously. But from what I do know and from what I understand, I think that there's actually quite a lot that has changed in the last 12 months. So I wanted to get your observations and experiences of working with clients and helping them on their journeys. So I'm coming back to you first, Mr. Drayton. What has stood out to you in the last 12 months, would you say?
Oh, it's a good question. I mean, customer journey is definitely the key. And James, to your point earlier, you don't need to apologize about not being a technical conversation, because I would say at Cisco, we're very much focused on what it means, from a customer-led perspective, and how we can improve those experiences as well. But in regards to the last 12 months, I suppose as a customer myself, the thing you don't want to hear is that there's a problem, in order to at least contact someone or understand how you could get something resolved. And I think not just in terms of swapping your bank there, Rob, but I mean, everything has changed over the past 12 months in regards to commitments we've made, financial commitments we've made, bookings we've made, travel arrangements we've made. All these things need to be looked at and changed. So never has, the whole different load of verticals been so busy handling these types of requests. And of course, those requests are coming in by people calling up. So, classic voice first like approach. But at the same time, people are often finding that they're getting better results and quicker results, either, through self-service or indeed through a channel that's talking or engaging with a real person, but just in a different way, be that through WhatsApp or Facebook or hashtagging. Naming and shaming on Twitter is great, isn't it? Just hashtagging the company, so you're not happy, and 2 seconds later, someone's calling you up. This is service that really works, and this is the kind of
that was definitely my go-to for like a couple of years. Or my sole use of Twitter was just to be able to shout at companies, metaphorically, because otherwise I would just be doom scrolling. The only actual contribution I had was to at someone to say I'm not happy, but it worked. And it's crazy that that's the most interaction you'd get from a company, as opposed to the actual channels that they apparently want you to use.
Well, it's the new word of mouth.
It's a really interesting point, because a lot of people think, well, there's multiple people managing those accounts for big organizations, but there's a lot of AI, there's a lot of analytics at work in the background on those accounts. So if I was to say I've lost something, I've lost my baggage, and I've flown with British Airways, and I phone them up and they go, sorry, it's lost. But if I badmouth them on Twitter, some piece of software will pick that up and will funnel it through to an appropriately trained agent who will contact me immediately. And this is where, we've previously talked about things like, within the ecosystem of a Cisco contact center, I've done an IMI deployment before, which did exactly that. There's an orchestration layer, a bit of intelligence that sits in there, does sentiment analysis on that account. And any tweet that has the potential to go viral where someone's badmouthed an organization just gets picked up and it gets nipped in the bud, because it'll go funnel through to an appropriately trained agent, and that agent will reach out and hopefully just quash that and improve the customer experience for that customer. But I guess that's not a route that you want people to go down. And as an organization and as an individual, it's not something you want to rely on. You want it to be a bit more organic and a bit more friction free, where you're not getting het up, so you have to put something on Twitter. So it's a delicate balance.
Yeah, going back, Rob, to your question about the last 12 months, what I've seen, especially last year, because I was doing a lot of prospecting last year, was that there's a lot of people out there today that have customer experience, customer journey, leader in, customer satisfaction, and all these job titles, and it all leads back to how can they enable that, for not just their customers, but how can they enable that for their employees, and how can they create, that kind of ambassador within the business, I suppose, that's, believes in the culture of being able to deliver that kind of customer experience and customer journey. I think that was kind of happening before.
Yeah, and I also like sorry to interrupt you there, Matthew, but I do like one trend I certainly have seen for certainly bigger companies is this kind of arms race of things like NPS and, just everyone publishing these things and making sure that they're very outward facing. People actually care what again, what the general sentiment is around them. And I think that's probably one particularly positive thing that I think has come of that. But carry on.
I was just going to say, as that developed with COVID, I mean, it's kind of put a rocket under everyone's bottom to think, how can we now really make a change and make a difference? Where before, when business is plodding along and revenues are being generated and, the normal is the normal, it's really put a highlight on those that can versus those that can't. I mean, there's nothing wrong with, of course, having some kind of message that says, you might hear a dog barking in the background or people are working from home, but, just the ability to work remotely in the contact center-like environment is something which obviously, cloud-like services and which Cisco heavily promotes, and enables. So that's a good news story. But of course, when you then also make a similar call and get a message to say, we're inundated, and not just that there's a long lead time before we can talk to you, but just we can't talk to you at the moment, which, we've also seen, then there's obviously a big failure there, and there's a lack of investment, there's a lack of foresight, and there's a lack of ability to pivot and be able to change with changing circumstances. I mean, it's COVID last year, but who knows what's around the corner next? I mean, I'm not thinking about negative things, but just the development of the industry in general.
I think that's really interesting because the where you mentioned about contact center traditionally isn't a contact center agent isn't traditionally a role where people associated with working from home. And although the technology existed for a long time, this has kind of made the not the industry, but customers who have contact centers sort of pull that plaster off in one go and say, oh my God, we have to move these people to work from home. And if you delve into why they weren't allowed to work from home in the past, and a lot of it was to do with things with trust. Because it's people might say, well, it's a low-paid role, it's adopted by younger people, all unfair labels that were given to people who work in contact centers. And let's not forget, it's the most monitored role in an organization, where you're monitoring what they're saying, how they're saying it, what the customer is saying back to them, when they take a break, how long they've gone to the toilet for, and yet we're now going, actually, they're now working from home, and it's fine. And the things that really came out, where I've talked to friends of mine and customers who've said the things that we didn't realize would be an issue when we sent people to work from home was people didn't have anywhere to sit. There were people in house shares or living in a room at their parents'. They didn't have a desk, they didn't have a screen, they didn't have a chair. And then suddenly you're talking about completely different things. You're thinking, well, hang on, all of the things that we took for granted, where their mental health and their well-being was taken care of by the person sat next to them, or having a break and going for a drink and chat to somebody at the water cooler. Those kind of things became more important. And although you can automate some of those, but there's nothing like that human contact. So it was different things took on a different importance. But then bigger organizations said, well, I have to protect my brand. So should I? And a lot of our customers have come to us and said, I want, PCI compliance for payments over the phone. I want that kind of solution. So, we were able to roll out network level solutions that meant that the customer didn't have to worry about their entire environment being in scope for compliance. But it also meant that we could then deploy analytics and go, well, have you got any customer card data in your estate? You could go and find it. So it was very different things that started to come out once people started to work from home. And, all of those proclamations came out from, Barclays and people like that, CEOs who said, well, the era of big buildings full of people is all over. But then it's kind of evolved over a period of time where a lot of people are backtracking. So Google have just today or yesterday said, well, actually, we would still have X amount of people working from the office, and we expect you to live within commuting distance of the office, which is, for big technology firms, that's a real swing, because before it was, people would go abroad. People who work for Natilik, who might not be from the UK went to see their families in Europe and said, well, I'm just going to stay here because I've got childcare, I've got a support network. And as an organization, we're like, well, that's brilliant, because it makes, you're still delivering the same things that you always deliver. And in these circumstances, why not take advantage of that? But it seems like slowly the world is now shifting back to the old normal. And I really thought that there would be a new normal, but it feels like it's slowly easing towards the old normal.
Well, yeah, I'd like, sorry to interrupt, but I think I'd personally like to see the new normal being choice, and the choice of the individual. I mean, I personally am desperate to get back into, I've got I got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and of course we've been home, and you get to this stage where you just want to get out, you want to be back with your friends, with your colleagues, you want to be in that different environment. But at the same time, if I do need to work from home and I need to balance that with my childcare commitments or whatever, I've got that option to do so, So I think in the past, to the point that you're making, some people just didn't have the choice, full stop. But if in any role, be it within, the contact center or any other role, I think choice is going to be the new normal that I'd like to see. In fact, it was funny, you mentioned Google. I mean, a couple of years ago, I remember there was a story, the Yahoo CEO actually cancelled home working completely. And anyone that wasn't happy with that had to leave the business, which was, again, completely extreme. So it's different views. But one of the things I really like about Cisco is the culture, and I know at Natilik as well, you guys have fantastic culture, and just being able to sort of live and breathe that and be part of something that is making a difference for your customer, and of course their customers. I think, James, you mentioned that before in terms of that tangible stuff that you see. I think that's really powerful.
Yes, it's we the roles that we work in, we do have the luxury, again, afforded to us by our employers, to have somewhat flexible working, and it does seem ironic, doesn't it, that we like that because we get treated like adults, and then, to Ajmal's point, the people that are the most watched and the most have the most information on how they are performing are actually the least trusted in the agents, simply because they're lower paid, or because the demographic is they tend to be sort of just out of university, when it's like, well, actually, if you just treated them like adults, you'd know pretty quickly who was good at and did their job and who didn't, because it'd be pretty obvious whether they were there doing it or not. So maybe you'd kind of get to better people quicker if you just treated them like adults. Who knows?
Yeah, and to move back to technology, I mean, I mentioned the word ambassador before, but I really believe in it. I mean, if we can use the technology to enable the employee to do the best job they can do and provide that satisfaction to them, so they believe in what they're doing, that obviously makes a big difference as well. I mean, we've spoken a lot.
And to that point, wouldn't that be most impactful to like an agent in a contact center, because that person represents your business and your brand.
Yes.
So if they feel the most empowered and the most happy, that's exactly spot on, because then they're gonna convey that to the person that they're talking to, and therefore I can't agree with that statement. More,
and
really.
to that point, I've seen a lot of really cool development in the AI space enabling that. I mean, we talk about AI in terms of self-service and spot on, like going onto a chatbot that just provides you with frequently asked questions as a response to something is not good enough today. But having something that is intelligent and responds specifically to the questions you're asking is really cool. But in the instance where you are engaged, with an agent and a human, that agent and a human is infallible as well and doesn't know the answers to everything in the world. But having AI services running in the background for them, suggesting maybe what to answer, how to answer, where to go, So rather than looking up, telling someone as an agent to go to an FAQ even and saying, okay, go here and you might find your answer. But actually the AI saying, do you know what, maybe you should check here. I've seen this article there, and actually this seems to be the answer. And then being able to relay that in real time. I mean, that's the type of stories that people tend to share. And that's, how businesses, really improve. I mean, I'll give you an example. Personally, for me, I know we certainly don't want to name and shame, but a fantastic experiences that I have is with Apple. I don't have to phone Apple often, but I have Apple products, computers, phones, iPads, etc. And if there ever is an issue, it's an issue that, one, they want to solve. Two, they understand what's going on. Three, they have all my history, my journey, what I've done in the past, my sort of purchases of as a customer, so they know sort of my loyalty to the business, all that kind of stuff. Not that any of that necessarily impacts the service they provide, but the point is, they know who I am, and they want to be there to help me. And there's never been a scenario where I haven't come out and it hasn't been a successful engagement and I haven't resolved what I needed to resolve. So, that way of working is what we need to obviously help the rest of our customers try to achieve, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because we're so close to being at a point where if I have to contact somebody and I need to speak to somebody, by the time I get through to a person, they will know who I am. They will know what services I'll buy from them. They'll know how many times I've contacted them in the short history. They'll know what mood I'm in based on the sentiment analysis of my previous interactions. They'll probably be able to guess what I'm about to ask for. And when the call is about to finish, the agent will get a recommendation of what I might call back about in the future. So not only can you get that single interaction with an organization where they can deal with your transaction from start to finish, but also they'll be able to predict, actually, you might call again about something in the future, and they can ask you that question.
I'm going to challenge you about that though, because why do you think that is now? Because if I had my notes, if I even had the Fernando, I reckon in that 3-hour session I had with Fernando nearly 6 years ago, that we talked around a lot of those themes. Now I know that like AI and bots and that kind of technology has come a long way, but I think some of that was achievable 6 years ago. And so why do you think that we're now more on the cusp of it now compared to then?
So my take on that is, and I've got some fairly strong views on it, it's mostly around, because if you think about the big organizations, the banks, think about the banks. They have got, so I was doing consulting around different banks probably 5 years ago, and they were still trying to incorporate green screens into new technology. And I'd say, well, you can take silos of data and join them together. And they go, yeah, but it's sat in my data center, which is downstairs. I've got a 10-year lease on it, and it's a green screen DOS type piece of software that's running. And then you're there thinking, well, can I do some screen scraping? Can I do this? Can I do that? Because you couldn't link them together. And what's basically put a rocket up their backsides is challenger banks. They're unencumbered by all of this history. And what do? They come to you straight away and go, it's an app. It's all on there. It knows exactly what you want before you know it. And you can very quickly set up a bank, and you don't have the old systems. You don't have as many people. You're much more agile, and you don't have the decision-making process that a huge organization with a massive history has. And if you, even with the organizations back 5-6 years ago, when we were talking about, I remember doing these presentations about knowing what the customer wants, and going across different, omni-channel type. Even omni-channel sounds quite old now, but it was, and a lot of people didn't know what that meant. If you'd asked somebody 5 years ago, what does omni-channel mean? They probably would have said every channel.
Yeah.
Whereas we now know that you can be omni-channel with just 2 channels. It's the ability to shift mid-transaction between channels seamlessly. So you could go from web chat, email to web chat to an agent, and all the context, sentiment, everything shifts with it. And you'll find that there's still not that many companies, large organizations. You're on a web chat and you'll hit a roadblock and they'll tell you to phone in. That's today. That's today.
Yeah.
So do you think the technology, even though the technology has improved, I think we'd all agree on that the technology has improved in that time, actually maybe more of the reason why it's happening now is just sheer digital disruption and competition from a minority of companies who have actually taken to a digital first approach versus the fact that the technology didn't exist and now it exists?
I think some of it goes back to something that you said a lot earlier, James, which is about take the technology out of the conversation. Because you'll get, when you go and speak to somebody, I go and speak to somebody, you know there's an IT person or an IT director in the room, and they want to talk about technology. If you just get business people in the room, they'll talk to you about the user experience, the customer experience, and the outcome they're trying to drive, and here's the data that's driving them. But if you get a technology person in the room or an IT director in the room, their job is to stop disruption because they want stability. Whereas it's the disruption that drives things forward. And if you think about the, I mean, if I'm allowed to say it, Matthew, Amazon Connect, when they first came along, they disrupted everything. So things like Cisco Flex and things like that came along after that because it was a pure consumption model, and everybody talked about as it was advertised that you need 5 minutes and a credit card and you've got a contact center, and we now know, and Amazon acknowledged that that was untrue because you can't do that. But it's a massive ecosystem of different spinning parts that need to work together. And with Cisco, they're not new to contact center, and they have an ecosystem that says, hey, it's off the shelf. They're building blocks. So if you say, I want IMI, it's pre-integrated. If you want upstream, it's pre-integrated. If you want Calabrio, if you want Verint, if you want analytics, advanced analytics, you want workforce management, optimization, they're all building blocks that just sit on a shelf. And you just say that you want it, and it just comes off and clicks together. And now with WebEx Contact Center 2.0 coming along, it's the bricks are smaller and further away, and the big building block, the center one, is massive because it's got most stuff in it. But what it does is, because in the API, in the world of APIs, if you've got something that isn't in that ecosystem, but doesn't matter, it's just an API, it's standard.
Yeah, and disruptors is going to be the key driver in a lot of areas. And to your point around Amazon Connect, it is that disruption. I mean, Cisco, from a legacy perspective, or even in terms of modern today, I think they've got about 3.5 million agents globally on their platforms on various different levels and architectures, etc. And I think that equates to about 35,000 enterprises across the globe as well. And with that being said and done, and as you mentioned with WebEx, the marketing team like to call it the new Cisco WebEx rather than WebEx 2.0. But be that what it may, I mean, this is another disruption to the industry. Okay, there are cloud services today and there's other things, but out of the box now, we're talking about, and you mentioned it, the sentiment analysis, the WebEx experience management, all of that really cool stuff that just works and happens as part of the implementation. You mentioned obviously the IMI piece and how seamless that will be, and how seamless it will even become as we develop those kind of application-like plugins to solve not technical problems, but customer journey issues, which is really, really exciting. And then on top of that, with, I think today we've got around 15 Solution Plus partners that deliver additional services like workforce optimization and management, all the other bits and pieces. So sorry, getting a bit geeky there, but I think it's really important to put it out there that there is another disruption tidal wave coming, and the new Cisco WebEx is definitely driving that, and it's going to be a really exciting time, and it's going to be up to the likes of us to help our partners and our customers understand what that means for them. And to the point around the disruption banking, these smaller like organizations, they get it, they know it, but for those that need that help, we're the experts, we're here. and we're looking forward to driving those conversations and looking what we can do, and not just how we can compete or stay the same, but how we can do things better as well. What's missing there, what can we improve on, etc. So that's where the exciting conversations are going to start happening.
Yeah, well, on that WebEx experience management bit, because 5, 6, 7 years ago, James, you mentioned it, customers were coming to us and saying, well, I need to be digital. I need to move to a digital platform. I need web chat. I need all sorts of different ways of contacting my customers. And back then, it wasn't very evolved because people didn't come to you with data. They just said, I want a channel turned on. And, people like us on this call, we were sat there going, wait, are you sure about this? Do you know what that's going to do? Because, we all know if you just turn on digital web chat for everybody, agents can do 2 web chats instead of 1 voice call, but each web chat takes twice as long as a voice call. So it's a false economy. But now customers are coming to you with data and they're saying, well, this is my number 1 query that I get in my contact center. And you look at it and go, that's quite easy to automate. Why don't we do that? And we can easily quantify the uplift in customer experience and the saving in an organization that would allow. And the more complicated queries would come into the contact center. And this goes back to a conversation I had with a customer who said that, well, surely voice isn't as important as it used to be. And whereas if you're in that industry, you think, well, no, voice is way more important now because customers have multiple ways to contact you. But if they get to a speech channel or they get to an agent, it's because they've escalated through the other channels to this point. And this could be your last port of call to save that customer. And average handle time is an old measure. It was a measure of how many queries you're dealing with and how quickly you're dealing with them. Whereas now, because your more complicated queries and customer interactions are escalating to an agent, they're going to be longer. You might have all the tools available, but they're just going to be a bit longer. And things like WebEx experience management are really important for identifying when that happens. So which digital journey is broken? Which piece of automation that I've put in, I've spent a lot of money on and tried to make it really slick, which bit of it is broken? And are customers still flowing out the other side? Am I still hemorrhaging into the contact center when I could just tweak a journey that would make all of that customer experience, would elevate it massively and reduce the weight on my agent estate, and they would deal with those more complicated. So your agents wouldn't be someone who knows a small amount about or a large amount about small amount of topics and just churn those out. They would probably be experts in certain areas and they know everything about it. And if a caller gets through to them, it's because they're the ones who are best suited to deal with that. And some of it might just be because the customer has had such a difficult journey and they're so unhappy that the agent's expertise might be on how to deal with a customer who's having a hard time. And in the future, agents won't be experts on policy, on systems, on terms and conditions. They'll be experts on empathy, on dealing with people, and there'll be people who are experts in processing a lot of information really quickly. Because imagine that an agent gets a screen pop of a ton of information about a customer. You have to then map out in what order do I show it to them. So the first thing I show them is they've gone through some biometric authentication, and I definitely know that it's James. And the second bit is I'll just color code it to say he's in a pretty bad mood because he's had these 5 previous interactions. He's not got what he wants. So I've been able to funnel him based on those, what he's trying to do, who he is, his mood, through to an agent. And then suddenly,
just interrupt. I'll tell you what puts me in a bad mood is when you do the security authentication, be it like with voice or be it by entering your date of birth or whatever it is. And then you get onto an agent and then they ask you what your date of birth is again or what your address is. It's like, oh my gosh, what is broken in that journey? It's that's pet hate.
Yeah, that was one of my nightmare bank experiences. I felt.
What's funny though is when Ajmal, is when you talk about that type of agent in that example, and then we compare it to where we started at the top of the conversation around the type of agents today and how they're completely 180. And it feels like that's what's happening with contact centers. Everything is flipping on its head. The type of individual that's going to be sat in the contact center needs to be a customer service expert who can, detect sentiment, who can assimilate a lot of information at once, who can act very quickly, and things like average handling time. Like, actually, don't you want average handling time to be long, like to a certain extent, like, within reason? Because actually, if the sentiment is positive and you can get that information, then a long call with your customer or your client is a positive thing. Like, they want to have a conversation with you. That's a good thing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So,
and you know what? There's a really good book by a guy called Mika Solomon, and it's called "When the Customer Wins, Nobody Loses," and it's all about customer experience. And I live by that. Like, when I think about my engagements with my customers, and what they want to do, for their customers, it's easy. When the customer wins, nobody loses. And what I like about the book, actually, just to plug his book, is he actually gives a series of examples of where people have gone above and beyond, as an agent, where how they've really helped, and not just how they've leveraged the technology, but how they've acted as a human, in that human to human interaction. I mean, I think we can all say we've had experiences where we've had to say to an agent or be interfaced with someone where we've had, look, can you just please talk to me? I mean, surely you know how I feel. Like, talk to me, like, put yourself in my shoes, for example, which is a crazy thing to have to say nowadays, but I'm sure we've all done it.
But when they're just repeating stock answers back to you, and you're like, just talk to me like I'm a human being, please.
Help me to help you.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for that, Matthew. That's our first book recommendation. We've had beer recommendations before, but not book ones.
I can give you some of those as well.
On the flip side of that book, Matthew, there's I think what's it called? Is it the Frictionless Journey? There's a quote from that I've used before, and it's one of the quotes is it's almost the opposite of what you've just said from that book.
I'm interested to see where this goes.
But the thing is, it applies in different industries because it depends what you're doing, and it's don't over deliver. Yeah, so it's don't over deliver, make it easy.
Okay.
And that's it. So because it's about setting an expectation. So say, for example, you're a mail order company, and someone's ordered something and they've ordered it with a delivery time of 2 to 3 days, which is standard, but you've delivered it in half a day. You've set the expectation, so the next time they're likely to expect it. But what you want them to do is be able to consume your service easily. So if you say, well, actually, I'm going to go all out to over deliver every single time, you're setting a new you're redrawing those lines of expectation. Whereas all you want them to do is to be able to order easily, get into the system, and know when it's happening. The thing that you don't want is, so I've had a good experience where I've ordered some shoes, and what happens is they tell you it's going to be delivered in 2-3 days, and they send you an email. So informational stuff that you just need to know, it comes via an email, which is a great way to communicate with people. But then if they need you to act on something, they send you an SMS because you're going to read that straight away. So, and as the window narrows of where they get more and more information about where your parcel is as it gets closer to your address, they narrow the window. They might say it's going to arrive on Wednesday. But as you get closer to Wednesday and they know where your parcel is, that window starts going, it's going to be in the morning. It's going to be between 9 and 11. It's going to be between 9:30 and 10:30. And before you know it, you know exactly where to be and when to be. And that's the frustrating thing, isn't it?
But isn't that actually in itself over delivery? Because I want to know where you buy your shoes, because when I buy my shoes, they don't turn up like that. I don't get this kind of telling me where it is every 5 minutes. So for me, that is over delivery because I'm actually getting a good service, and that's the crazy thing. Getting a good service is over delivery.
You need to spend more money on your shoes, James.
well,
the
thing on that
shoes,
particular,
which is very, very poor thing to admit on a public facing podcast. But yeah.
Well, on that particular one, it's very it's a model, obviously, a technology and a process model that they've deployed, and it works for every single person. But when it's something on a delivery lead time, then it's more to do with how quickly it churns its way through the system. Some might take a long time, some might take less time, and it's the expectation that you set, and it's about the reality versus the expectation. So if you just say, actually, my parcel is delivered every 3 days after I've ordered it every single time, and you go, well, that's fine, because I know that's the window that it's supposed to deliver in. But if the next 5 are delivered in the next day very early in the morning, you're kind of in the back of your mind hoping that it'll always be that, but disappointed when it isn't, even though your company is delivering.
I get your point, but I'd say as long as there's communication, as long as there's that constant communication, which is clearly the process that they've created, then if it doesn't turn up within a day, you're not going to be that disappointed, because at least you're still being communicated with as to where it is. And I think that I definitely lean more to Matt's kind of book.
Well, look,
Rob,
just to interject, it's an interesting debate, but I think sometimes this kind of debate is generational as well. Like, because we all want different things.
Careful where you take.
I think there's a dig in there.
And and none of us are too old on this call, that's for sure. But oh my God. Well, I'll tell you what. Like, I'm 41, so I'm well on my way as well. But yeah, it's interesting because I mean, I really like my DPD app that actually shows me where my driver is, and tells me I'm stop number 56 on the route, and I see a map of where he is. And look, it's not brain surgery in the way technology can be delivered today, especially from sort of the scalability of the cloud, etc. And why couldn't you display that in an agent interface? Why couldn't they have that same visibility? Well, they can, I mean, I was on a call with Dyson the other day because my very, very expensive vacuum cleaner, part of it broke. I was on the call with the agent because I didn't want to use a digital channel and start typing all this stuff. So I just wanted to call someone. I got on a call and he escalated it to a video chat through the web browser of my phone. He said, show me what's broken. So I showed him, some of the rubbers come away and the seal's not working properly. Oh yeah, no problem. I know exactly what that is. We'll get a new unit out to you. You're still under guarantee. And it's like, it's just done, and it's brilliant. Giving that enablement is the key thing. Over the Easter weekend, actually, I spent some time with my sister-in-law and her children, and her girl's just about to turn 16 actually in the next couple of weeks. And so I said to her, look, what app do you use most on your phone at the moment? I haven't spoken to a 16-year-old for a long time. She was like, oh, Snapchat is the one. I was like, oh, how does that work? How's it different from WhatsApp or some of these omni-channel capabilities that we use? And she started to explain to me, all of the extra capability and functionality, the gaming, the way to connect, the security as well, and the different processes. And I mean, again, for me, it was just another world. But like for her to then, as a 16-year-old, have to interface with any organization that she deals with in the way that I interface with my organizations that I deal with, I mean, it is completely different, and it will be completely different, and and it's forever changing. I mean, that's the way it is, But the point is, if you're 16 or you're 86, like you have to provide services to all of your customers, and that's the key.
I think you've exposed yourself there in ways that you might not have expected that would happen, Matthew, and who knows what kind of. I'll make sure I forward on all the comments that we get here, calling you out on your antiquated attitudes. But unfortunately, we're out of time, gents. I feel like we could. There's plenty more beef that we could be airing here, and conversations that we could be having. But it's been great. What I want to do is just make sure that we point people in the direction of. So Matthew, we talked a little bit at the beginning about your video series. What's coming? What else can we expect there? So that's just focused around WebEx Contact Center, right? But you're doing that in sort of smaller chunks, aren't you?
Yeah, so it's 5-6 minutes at the most, little clips, really easy to consume. It's quick wins for me, and it's quick wins for my customers, because it's not meeting after meeting and demos after demos. It's just like, well, check this out first, and then we'll continue from there. So that's great. We're going to evolve that as time goes on, from very basic, this is look and feel, to this is some of the more advanced capabilities that you can start to think about, which will include the IMI piece and other things like that. But it's just a great forum and a great way to be able to communicate on a large scale. I use LinkedIn a lot as well, so look me up, Matthew Drayton, on LinkedIn, and feel free to connect. That's also a great medium, and I post a lot on there. Sometimes it's very focused on business and what's going on from a market perspective, and sometimes it might just be a picture of me cycling to work, or not actually cycling to work, cycled to work rather, and things like that. So it's
Nice.
It's great to be able to connect with everyone in that way.
Good. And then from an Natilik side, we're running a series. I mean, we're always there, obviously, to discuss contact center, but we're obviously running our return to the office campaign at the moment. So we're going to be offering Natilik contact center workshops to try and help clients transition into the world of hybrid working as we continue to move forward. So please do keep an eye out for that. And we'll include a link in the show notes to both Matthew's video series as well as where you can get more information on the Natilik Contact Center. All that leaves me to do is thank you for your time, gents. So James, Ajmal, Matthew, it's been a pleasure. You all passed the test. Hopefully we'll bring you back sometime in the near future.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Looking forward to Robbie Thor's book club coming soon.
Book club.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to NatChat, the Natilik podcast. Please subscribe to the Natilik podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. And leave us a review while you're there. It really helps us improve and grow the show. Please note that opinions expressed on the Natilik podcast are those of the hosts or our guests, not the organisations that they represent. You can find more information on Natilik on our website, that's natilik.com. You can also find us on social media. On Twitter, we're at Natilik Group, as well as Facebook and LinkedIn. Our theme music was provided by Dan Shaw, who you can find at Danzer, that's DANZR, on music streaming services. This is Rob Thor, and thanks again for listening.